Gentlemen, everybody, welcome back to Unarmored Talk podcast. Again, 2 weeks have gone by that fast. I am still your host. Hopefully, I don't get fired by, I don't know, but I am you guys, right? I do it because you guys support the podcast. I'm your host, Mario P. Fields. And today's amazing guest is Amanda Huffman. But before I bring her in and on, if you're watching on video, she just waved audio. Click on the link and watch the video. Awesome, motivating wave. But before I bring on Amanda, thank you again to the listeners and viewers of Unarmored Talk podcast. Thank you to all the guests who had the courage to remove their armor to talk about a personal or professional challenge or life experience to help people develop a accurate way of thinking. Truly appreciate everyone. And for everyone that's watched a video or you continue to share the content from this podcast on video, you are making an impact to the two schools we've adopted through my nonprofit, Still Serving Incorporated in Pitt County, North Carolina. You can go on my website at www.stillservinginc.com and learn more. All volunteer nonprofit, and we are about to eclipse over $10,000 of monies and funding to those two schools in helping them gain more skills through programs that they do not have funding for, but we provided for them. So I'm done. I'm done with all the admin. I'm done with it. I'm done. So here we go. Amanda Huffman, ladies and gentlemen, she's a Marine. You know, I had to mess with you, Amanda.
I know. I know.
I was messing with her before the show. No, she's an Air Force veteran. She's an author, and she's also the host and producer of her own podcast, Women in the Military. If you guys haven't subscribed and followed her show or left a rating and review, shame on you. Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
No, thank you. Thank you for being patient. I know you and I talked about 6-7 months ago,
Right.
and your podcast is doing amazing, and so is mine. But now we're able to do this. So thank you. So please share a little bit about yourself with our listeners and viewers.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Amanda Huffman. I'm an Air Force veteran. As Mario said, I served as a civil engineer in the Air Force, and I got to deploy with the Army, even though I served in the Air Force, and I went to Afghanistan. And then when my first son was born, I got out of the military. My husband is still active duty. He's actually in the Space Force. And so we were both active duty, and it was like, I don't think we can both keep doing this. And so I got out to be a stay-at-home mom, and then that led me to writing and podcasting and all the things that I'm doing today.
Wow. And let's talk about your book. I mean, it's not easy to become an author. I'm trying to go, I'm going on that journey, as we speak. So talk to us about your book real quick.
Yeah, so I wrote A Girl's Guide to Military Service, which is a book for high school girls who are considering military service, because I felt there was a need for girls who are considering the military to have a book that's written specifically for them. And I started with a free guide, and I was like, how am I going to find these girls? But then they started downloading it and gave me confidence that I should write a book about everything that I wished I had known when I was joining the military. So we cover, not just joining, like figuring out if the military is right for you, but what branch and career field. And then we talk about like being a mom or setting up your finances or mental health and all the things that I think you should know to have a strong foundation for military service.
Wow. Girls Guide to Military Service. I might have to bring that into the two schools, at my high schools. I think that's a good resource for young ladies to have if they're considering joining. So truly appreciate that. Well, let's jump right into the topic. Here you are, an active duty spouse, both of you and your husband, by definition. But we're going to talk about you today. You're an active duty spouse. You're transitioning out of the military. From my understanding, there's a family. You guys you decided to have children. You have all of this going on as you're getting out. How was that journey?
It was not smooth sailing, that's for sure. It was really challenging. I I didn't know what to expect. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna get out of the military. It's so hard to be in the military, and I'm gonna be a stay-at-home mom, and that's gonna be easy, right?" And then I was like, "This is not easy. This is really hard and really challenging." And I was also dealing with like losing my identity, which I didn't realize how important being a officer in the military, being a civil engineer, like just being in the Air Force meant to me. And then it was gone, and I was like, "Wait, what just happened?" So it was really hard.
Overnight too, huh?
Yeah.
It, it you know, and it's interesting you brought up how you believe being a stay-at-home mom, running, taking care of the house is easier than serving on active duty. But you quickly realize my belief is that, man, it's harder to run a house. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are aspects of military life that are really hard, but I think as a military spouse, I didn't give up a lot of those. We still move. I still have to, deal with my husband's unpredictable schedule and figure out like everything that's going on. And so I thought me not being in would make it easier. And in some ways it made it easier because there was stability, but that meant that a lot of the instability like fell on me to manage, and I wasn't like prepared for that. Like
Mm.
he left 2 months after my son was born for 8 weeks, and I was at home alone with the new baby and trying to figure it out, and I was like, "Wait, what's going on? This is not easy." When he would go TDY before, it'd be like, "Oh, it's a vacation. I'll go hang out with my girlfriends." And then he left and I was a mom and I was like, "This is not a vacation. This is overtime."
Where where's the timesheet?
Right.
Do we get time and a half for this? Yeah, right there. There should be a spot on the resume where we could put that in as a soft skill that's in high demand, Um,
Yes.
and then you mentioned identity. From numerous conversations around the world, I've heard a lot of service members talk about they felt like they lost their identity. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I guess I had an ego. I guess I still do, but I had this like little spiel. I feel embarrassed talking about it, but I had this little spiel where like I
Unarmored
would
talk.
tell
It's unarmored talk. So you
exactly.
good.
So I would like tell someone like they'd be like, "What do you do?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm in the military." And they'd be like, "Oh, that's cool." And I'd be like, "It gets better." Like I'm also an engineer. I'm an officer. I deployed to Afghanistan. And they would get like really excited and interested in what I was doing. And then I left and people would be like, "What do you do?" "I'm a stay-at-home mom." "Okay." And like nobody cared. And even when I
Wow.
would try and talk about my service, people would just be like, they wouldn't they wouldn't care and they wouldn't ask questions or they wouldn't really understand. They would just be like, "Why, what do you mean you're a veteran? You're a spouse." And I was like, "No, I'm a veteran and I know what veteran means. I know what spouse means." And so it was really hard in that aspect of like not being recognized the same way that I was before.
Wow, I never looked at it like that. Here you are, an officer in the United States Air Force, civil engineer, and now you got to convince people you served.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know, you walking around with your DD 214. All right, here you go. Here it is. Here
Yeah.
line number 3. Here it is. Here it is. And so, how did you get through that? At what point did you find that s- space where you were at peace and there's clarity, and you're like, this is what I'm doing.
So I think what I first did was like, well, that's not comfortable. So I'm just gonna not talk about being a veteran. I'm gonna like close that part off of me, which is funny because now all I do is talk about being a veteran. But I just kind of like pulled back. I like focused on being a mom. I focused on like I tried to be a travel blogger. I tried to talk about natural birth. I tried to talk about all these things that weren't military, but they also didn't really resonate with me as a person. And then someone told me, "I think your story is really interesting and I want to hear more." And that was like, oh, that so that part of my story still is important and it still is interesting. It's just that some people don't get the same reaction, but that doesn't mean it's not important. And so that kind of led me to start telling more of my story. And then I started collecting other stories and it just kind of snowballed into that.
And I love how you didn't give up. You're
Yeah.
right. And I love how you did some self-reflection. You were aware of your emotions, but you didn't give up. You didn't stop. We're now, like you said, it's interesting how something you was trying to kind of run away from. Now look at your podcast. I mean, now
Right.
your last guest, you're like, I'm sorry, I know you're not a veteran, but she had an amazing, you guys had an amazing episode for Women's History
Yeah.
Month. Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. So as I want to say your son, right? When you got out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, as you guys are kind of growing together, what were some of the effects that you think or how do you think you developed and changed because you had your son at that during that transition time?
I think that it led me, now I'm really going to take off the armor. It led me to go and get help for some of the mental health stuff that I was,
Wow.
keeping under wraps. Like everything was fine but then with my husband being gone, my son being born, like losing my identity, like all those things coming to head, I realized there was something going on inside of me. So I actually spent a lot of time through a program called Celebrate Recovery, which is kind of like a mixture of AA and Al-Anon, but it's all together and more faith-based with God being
Right.
instead of higher power. And so I went through the 12 steps through that. And through that journey, I learned a lot about like some of the resentment and hurt that happened on my deployment that I was still holding on to, and just, you know, things from my childhood that were affecting me in ways. And so there were like, it led me to like be at a breaking point where I was like, I need to get help. And so that's been life changing, and really I've gone to therapy along with doing the 12 steps, and it's just been life changing to go through that experience.
Thank you for sharing on this podcast. I mean, I would have never thought that the birth of a child, right, and transitioning out could actually been a blessing, for a wonderful professional like yourself. And it was a choice. I
Right.
mean, you and I both know that what some of the hardest things for military folks is to go, I need some help.
Oh
We're
yeah.
good at, we are great at helping everyone in the world. But boy, when it comes to us going, anyone got any questions? I need some help.
Yeah. The first time I tried to go to the Celebrate Recovery meeting, I went in the car and I was like, I'm good. It's fine. And like then I had such a bad week. The next week I was like, I'm going to that meeting. I don't care what happens. Like I'm not even allowing myself to think. So like I started driving and I was like, you're not allowed to think about this. You are only allowed to drive. And that's how it was so hard to go to the first meeting. But then, at the first meeting I started crying. So it was a lot easier to go back because it was like I knew I was in the right place. I knew I was finally on a journey to get help and stopping from just trying to do it by myself. But it was really hard to go.
Mm. What would you say is probably one of the toughest things you had to do as a professional, as an adult?
Yeah, I mean, I literally had to get in the car and not think, because the first time, like, I think it's a good story now that, like, I should have went the first week, but it's kind of like a good story of showing like how hard it was. Like I was like, I got in the car and I was in the car ready to go. My husband had the kids, everything was fine. And I was like, I walked back in, he's like, I thought you were going to a meeting. I was like, I think I'm good. And he's like, oh, okay. And then the next week I like forced myself to go because I was like, you can't keep going through this. You can't, like, you need to get help. And so, but it was
Wow.
a process.
Amanda went up to the plate to bat she's the first one on the plate to swing, ladies and gentlemen, and then she went back to the dugout. "I'm good. I
Right.
walked up to the plate, and so we're good."
Right.
put, put a score on the scoreboard.
Yeah, it doesn't work that
Wow.
way. You have to do the work. You have to do the work.
Yeah, and it's definitely a choice, and I am thankful just from knowing you since last year. I'm thankful you made that choice, and so now kind of self-reflecting, right? Looking back on how you went through some of your physical or mental challenges, and you're thriving, right? You're thriving. If you had to give any advice to anyone including, women who are serving throughout the world, uh, to better prepare themselves mentally or physically for a transition, especially if children are involved? What would you tell
I would tell them that my 7-year-old just walked in. Sorry.
them? No,
Um,
that's cool.
I would tell
Hey,
them that
your 7-year-old was like this. I got this, mom.
I would tell them that it's a journey, like it's not a destination. Like you have to, you have to fail at things, you have to take new turns, you have to pivot when something's not working. And I feel like in the military, you have like this handbook, like step one is this, step two, but then you also have your like COAs. And I think sometimes in the military we forget like that, yeah, we have like a structured outline, but we also have COAs if like things go wrong. And like mission things go wrong all the time. So like we have all the tools, but sometimes we forget because we get into this like structured path and then we think, oh, if I start a business, it's going to be structured and everything's going to work like a just like when I had my son. Well, he's going to do this and this, and it's like, no, he's a person. He's not a robot, so he's not going to do A, B, and C. He's going to do, whatever letter he pulls out of the alphabet. And so it took a lot of like realizing like I have to use the tools the military gave me and not the structure, because so many people talk about you have structure and you have all this, but like how to improvise and how to like keep moving forward and how to pivot. I think the military really teaches us that, but sometimes we don't realize how good we are at doing that because we think about like the structure and the rigidity, and we actually have all the other characteristics as well.
I love it, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone, you guys heard from Amanda Huffman. Hey, don't be rigid. Have a have a scalable plan, and it's a journey. It's not I like that. It's a journey. It's not a destination. And be ready to fail because it's okay to fail. Amanda? How can people find you?
So the best place is to go to my blog, which is www.airmantomom.com. But I also am on LinkedIn. It's my favorite social media platform. So if you're on LinkedIn, definitely connect with me there.
Yes, and I'll make sure those are in the show notes in the audio and video. Well, again, Amanda, thank you so much. Thank you for your service. And tell your husband I said thank you for continuing to serve. And I appreciate what you're doing out there in the content creator digital space world and helping people with your amazing podcast. Well, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, couple of weeks. See you guys later. You guys know how to sign off. Be safe. God bless you. Take care. Bye bye, Amanda.